We take tilt sensors and gyroscopes for granted. Not only are they in our phones and TV remotes, they've been a part of gaming for years. When it comes to Nintendo handhelds, motion control wasn't built directly into the hardware until the 3DS. The DS had Activision's Motion Pak, a Game Boy Advance cartridge housing a tilt sensor used in conjunction with Hawk Motion. I covered this unique game with its own video if you wanted to see more, but gyro control still wasn't something built directly into the hardware. The pioneer of Nintendo's handheld motion control gaming came in the form of Nintendo's Pink Puffball. This uniquely cool looking pink cartridge contains Kirby Tilt and Tumble, the first Game Boy Color game to feature a tilt sensor. Released in the summer of 2000s, Kirby's one and only Game Boy Color game required players to physically twist and turn the handheld console to control Kirby like a marble on a dinner plate. Again, it's easy to take for granted today, but back in the day this was very unique and pretty unbelievable. There is an unfortunate downside though. Playing on a non-backlit Game Boy Color was challenging since it's difficult to see the screen with all the twisting and turning. In theory, it's possible to play on the big screen using a GameCube Game Boy player, but this isn't exactly an ideal way to play either. Thanks to modern screen mods, playing on actual hardware can be a lot more comfortable. However, this game is only playable on Game Boy Color and the original Game Boy Advance. It isn't compatible with the GBC because the cartridge is in the reverse position, making all movements essentially backwards. The developers didn't have this foresight, so there's no option to swap to an SP mode within the menu. The good news is, Kirby Tilt and Tumble is playable in all its motion-controlled glory using the Game Boy Switch Online app. Whether using Joy-Cons or a Pro Controller, tilting works really well. And I personally think it's awesome that Nintendo found a clever way to re-release this forgotten game to their modern console. While Kirby's action platforming title was the first to the starting line, there's one other game that had the balls to utilize the Game Boy Color Tilt Sensor. And that is this guy right here, the Japan-exclusive Command Master, released in late 2000 by Enix a few months after Kirby Tilt and Tumble. Before talking about its gameplay, I have to take a moment to acknowledge this box art and cartridge design. Seriously, look at this. Command Master has to have one of the best Game Boy boxes of all time. If I saw this game sitting on a shelf, even if I had no clue how special and unique it was, I would probably have bought this game from the package design alone. It also highlights the tilt sensor with its own icon on the box, and this eye-catching design also extends to the beautiful instruction manual. And it breaks my heart because you don't see stuff like this anymore. And the cartridge itself, I mean, look at this. To my knowledge, this is the only cartridge released on this clear galaxy blue design, and it's easily one of the coolest cartridges ever released. This and Kirby Tilt and Tumble, there's just something about these clear colors that lets the player know they're holding something special. But the only thing more unique than Command Master's package design is its gameplay. Instead of being an action or platforming game, Enix does what they do best. They made a freaking RPG revolving around the tilt sensor. This is a classic JRPG that uses the tilt sensor for combat and more. Even if an English patch was available, it wouldn't do any good because you need to play this game using the special tilt cartridge, something no flash cartridges have, at least to my knowledge. So the only way to play it, like Kirby Tilt and Tumble, is to play the real thing on a Game Boy Color or original GBA. The GBA SP sadly will not work due to the positioning of the cartridge. As a quick side note, the Analogue Pocket has this cool feature where you can insert a DS Rumble Pak into the cartridge slot and then play Rumble Pak compatible Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games off the SD card with Rumble. I made a video on this innovative feature if you wanted to learn more, link in the description, but wouldn't it be awesome if it somehow was possible to insert the Hawk Motion Pak into the Analogue Pocket to play these tilt sensor games? I'm not sure if coders would want to take the time to implement this feature that only works with 2 games, but a man can dream. Without knowing Japanese, be fully aware Command Master is a tough game to navigate, and Google Translate, at least for me, didn't work that well. In fact, it took me an hour to figure out how to pass the damn opening tutorial. I almost whipped my Game Boy Color across the room out of frustration, and because the game requires an insane amount of motion. I literally played the opening tutorial several dozen times before I finally figured out how the tilt controls actually work. So here's the deal. Apologies as it's hard to film this whole thing while tilting the small Game Boy Color screen, but try to stay with me. You see those arrows on the side of the screen? And you see those letter icons right by it? Set to a DDR-like rhythm, you need to tilt the Game Boy in the right combination to unleash attacks, ending with the system in the neutral position to confirm the input. But each one of those letter icons indicates the type of attack you can perform. For example, you might need to tilt left, right, neutral, another attack might be down, up, neutral, and so on. These motions need to be completed accurately in a short amount of time too. Actually, entering these commands reminds me of Sabin's blitz attacks from Final Fantasy VI, only using tilt controls instead of inputting Street Fighter-like button prompts. But tilting the Game Boy is only half of it. Other times the player will need to shake violently the Game Boy to build power. There's this meter at the bottom to indicate the direction you need to shake, not tilt but shake the Game Boy. Shaking casually though simply doesn't work. No, you seriously need to shake weight this bitch to get it to register. But since you need to shake it so violently, you literally can't see the screen. Instead, you need to wait until you hear the ding, then you'll know you need to change from an up and down shake to a left and right shake. So be sure not to accidentally chuck your Game Boy across the room. It's really cool that Enix went all in on the tilt sensor by incorporating it into an RPG. Seriously, it's crazy to think that they took the time, effort, and money to develop this game. I haven't seen any sales data on Command Master, but adding the tilt sensor would have only increased the cost to produce these cartridges. But they really went all in. The visuals are created with a Dragon Quest level of quality with a soundtrack to boot. Again, the box art, instruction manual, and cartridge design are way over the top. They even added 2-player link cable support. Just keep in mind, without being able to read Japanese, twisting and shaking your Game Boy without having a clue as to why kills the incentive. But from what I can gather though, this RPG is fine. Nothing great. Tilting the battle gets old after a while. And the crazy shaking sequences aren't exactly fun. They're tiring in fact, but the novelty is there. There wasn't anything like this at the time, and honestly there hasn't been anything like it since. For that, Command Master and Kirby Tilt and Tumble are titles that should be fully acknowledged for being tilt sensor pioneers. But what do you think? Have you ever played a tilt sensor game? Which motion controlled game is your favorite but you can't say Wii Sports? And which unique Game Boy cartridge game should I cover next? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see more content on the most obscure gaming topics, like how I covered all Game Boy Color Rumble Pak games, all Game Boy Advance single pack linkable games, and titles that took advantage of the GameCube to GBA link feature, check out my dedicated playlist in the description. And huge thanks goes to Patreon supporter Chris for sending me this mint copy of Command Master from Japan. This video would not have been possible without this support, so mega ultra huge thanks. Until next time, thank you for watching and game on.